At Indianapolis, it's the fourth and final day of time trials as they prepare for the Indianapolis 500, and it has been an up and down world as they are readying themselves for the greatest spectacle in racing.
On the day commonly known as Bubble Day, you always find drama and usually you find intrigue. We've had both with 5 qualifiers. 3 have been bumped from the field, and now there's talk that it may be more than 33 that run a week from today in this great spectacle.
It is Bubble Day, and it's supposed to be this way. I'm standing beside 33-year-old Scott Harrington, whose car is perched up on a jack stand some 2.5 feet off the ground. They had an oil leak in the right side of this car. No, it's not his car. It's a car borrowed from A.J. Foyt to try to get this car in the field. It's what Bubble Day is about. Last-minute survival for a driver trying to pull out all the stops to get it qualified. We'll tell you his story and follow it this next hour and a half from Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
ESPN Speed World presents coverage of the fourth and final day of time trials, Bubble Day, at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Welcome, I'm Paul Page. John Beekes is here. Indianapolis 500 champion Tom Sneva is with us. So is Gary Gerald and Jerry Punch. And boy, do we have some stories to tell you. It has been a day that many expected to be very quiet. It has not turned out at all that way. We've had qualifiers. The field is now full. We've had some cars bumped out of the field. We have some cars yet to try to get in the field. In the garage and pit area, there's a lot of wheeling and dealing, not only to get cars, but maybe to get a small change in the rules. So it's turned out to be interesting thus far. We expect it to continue to be.
And I think really, Paul, the big story that so many people are talking about is the fact that right now, the fastest 33 cars are not in this field. There's 33 cars that fill it, but there's a lot that are occupied by what they call the reserved or protected position. So the jury is still out on that one. There's a lot of people having meetings, some people looking for race cars, some people trying to get race cars fixed. It should be great.
And of those who can be bumped, the next in line to go out at just over 210 miles an hour is Claude Bourbonnais. He qualified into the field earlier. Johnny Unser was in the field. He's been bumped out. Zampedri was bumped out and worked his way back in as his story of courage, of recovery from the last year's accident continues here. There's the cars that are on the bubble. Bourbonnais, then Steve Kinser, 210.5, 210.7. But there are cars in the field like Velez, Vitolo, both of the Groffs, Jack Miller and Buzz Calkins, who have qualified well below these speeds, but because they are protected cars, they have scored points in the Indy Racing League, they are not in danger of being bumped out. What is being discussed, and discussed only in rumor circles, is why don't they just add guys to the back of the field?
Well, of course, there's nothing written in stone that they have to start just 33 cars, and there has been a lot of lobbying going on. One of those drivers that was bumped, of course, was Lynn St. James. She went to the office, tried to get them to expand the field, and we're not sure that she's got that done.
The cars that are exempt but are well under that 210.5, Velez, Guerrero, Vitolo, Robbie, and Mike Groff. Mike Groff is the current points leader in IRL points. Paul Durant, Jack Miller, and Buzz Calkins. So those are the stories that we're looking at the Indianapolis Speedway. Paul Durant has been on the race course in the car that he qualified for A.J. Foyt just a little bit earlier, car number 1, and we're waiting to see if any qualifiers come out. ESPN Speed World coverage of the fourth day of time trials at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway is brought to you today by Pennzoil, formulated for today's stop-and-go driving. Stop, go Pennzoil. And by Motel 6. The new Motel 6 is renovating across America. Call 1-800-4MOTEL-6 for reservations. Let's go down to the pits as we keep an eye on Paul Durant. Also keeping an eye on things is Jerry Punch.
Well, thank you very much, Paul. This scenario is very similar. It's very, very familiar for Scott Harrington. You know, a year ago, Scott Harrington went through a very similar scenario. After 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Bubble Day, he got into a backup car and had to qualify a John De La Pena car after his original car was wrecked in a practice accident. He did get, in fact, into the Indy 500 field. Now, this year, 1997, he was set to come here and drive for Stefan Johansson in a G-Force with an Aurora Power. The Aurora engine didn't materialize. They had to take the car back to the shop, work 4 days to retool it for the Infinity motor. They got the car here early this week. Now, fuel pressure problems with that car, a lack of speed, and suddenly they borrowed this car from A.J. Foyt. This was a 14T car, a backup car for Davey Hamilton. They brought it out. Harrington got in the car to go out and get some laps, and just that quickly, there was smoke from the rear of the car, an oil leak. They have since put the car up on jacks here on the pit road. They have found that it was an O-ring that had been cut in the right rear of the engine. They have replaced the O-ring. They're trying to get the oil from underneath the under tray, and hopefully very, very soon, Scott Harrington will have a very big task at hand to get this car on the racetrack with limited practice and somehow qualify it for the 81st running of the Indianapolis 500.
Paul Durant is the only car practicing now. He's already qualified, been circulating at 210.3 miles an hour. A.J. Foyt's crew, they continue to work on the Harrington car, trying to get it going, and we've got some other stories to tell. Take a trackside seat to the NHRA Pontiac Excitement National, Sunday, June 15th, live all day on pay-per-view for only $14.95. Call your cable operator or satellite provider to subscribe. Well, as Paul Durant circles the track, a very interested observer is Scott Sharp. Gary Gerald?
Well, this has been one of those intriguing days, as bubble days seemingly always are at Indianapolis. A.J. Foyt's team put a third driver, Paul Durant, in the field at a 209+ miles per hour. He stepped into Scott Sharp's car, basically. And, Scott, I know you've been asked so many questions about how you're feeling, how you're coming along. What's your reaction to all this business as you've seen this team grow almost by the day?
Well, it's true. I guess it's the last day, so this is as much as we can grow. But it's good. It's a good opportunity for Paul. You know, he was getting ready to leave tomorrow if he didn't get the ride from AJ. And at the same time, I think if there was any way I was able to run or any way that we would get cleared, Paul would be gracious enough to step out and let me get in. So it's sort of gives us a little more flexibility as a team, I think. But more than likely, I think he'll probably end up running the car.
We're going to step back over here to the side because the car is coming in right now, and you've opened up the door to what everybody wants to know about. Is Tuesday is the magic day where you're going to have another MRI, is that correct?
Well, I am going to have another MRI. It's up in the air exactly how much, what we're going to have to go through to get me approved. I feel fine. I felt basically fine since about the second or third day. I haven't had any headaches, any dizziness, anything. So we're just got to see how the MRI looks and then go from there, and who knows how it'll turn out.
Well, obviously, yesterday you were saying you felt 99 and 4400% sure you wouldn't be in the race. Has that changed at all in 24 hours?
I don't know. I'd hope it'd be a little bit better because I feel so good, but you never know. The doctors are very conservative, and they certainly don't want to take any risks. So I'm going to try like heck to try to make this race, but if we can't, we'll have to keep our eyes focused towards Dallas.
And believe me, if he can't, there's a guy sitting down here right now in the cockpit of car number 1, Paul Durant, who says, I'll do a heck of a job if Scott Sharp can't be here. He's already done, in my mind, Paul, a very impressive job today. He only had 12 laps, went out, qualified at nearly 210 miles per hour. Now he's running 210 with a race set up, and it's amazing what can happen in a short amount of time in Indianapolis.
The A.J. Foyt team splitting forces while they try to get Paul Durant's car ready to race. They're trying to get Scott Harrington's car ready to run.
And, of course, that was so interesting to see how it developed with exempt cars, non-exempt cars. What were the team owners going to decide? And here A.J. Foyt takes advantage of it and gets another car in.
On the track itself, it is still open for either practice or qualifications. Cars are taking advantage of the practice right now, and the sun is shining. We had a brief shower that came through here, closed everything for a while, but it is back sunshiny again with no threat of rain. Join us tonight when ESPN's Sunday Night Baseball Game of the Week takes you to Turner Field in Atlanta, when the Braves will host the St. Louis Cardinals tonight at 8 o'clock here on ESPN. Well, there is the beautiful shot of the long 5/8 of a mile main straightaway pit area, the Tower Terrace, and in extension, many of the hospitality suites, and of course, that sweeping, gigantic grandstand, 2 decks at Indianapolis. It's quiet on the track at the moment. It has not been throughout this day. We want to take you back and run you through some of those things that have occurred today. It has been a most fascinating time, and it started right after noon here when Johnny Unser was the first in line, ready to go qualify. And Jan Bikas, we were talking one of the Himmelgarn cars, and even before he went out, there was some concern and controversy about whether or not it was protected.
Well, there was. Up until today, everyone was saying, and even the official USAC master list showed that Buddy Lazier's position with Himmelgarn was not protected, and that Johnny Unser, when he climbed into the 91 car, which they afterwards changed to number 9, that would have been a guaranteed spot. But by the time that car rolled out onto the racetrack, it found out that Ron Himmelgarn had either changed his mind or had decided that he wanted the exemption to go with Buddy and not with Johnny, and we were all very surprised by that because he hadn't really had speed that necessarily would put him very solidly in the field.
Well, we're watching our live pictures of Ari Leyendijk, the pole sitter at Indy. He has been testing the car much of this day. I say Ari when in fact it's Eddie Cheever. I love all the red, white, and blue cars. Tom Sneva, an interesting decision by Ron Himmelgarn, and I think he was just trying to be a purist, trying to do the honorable thing and say, hey, I don't need an exemption.
Well, it's sort of the old catch-22, the letter of the law or the spirit of the law type situation. I think Himmelgarn made a nice gesture by saying, hey, it was Buddy Lazier that earned the exemption, and we're going to leave it with Buddy Lazier, even though it would have assured that he had another car in the race if he would have left it with Johnny Unser. But you know, he wanted to be fast there. Actually, the speed is good, but we'll just have to wait and see how this whole plays out.
All right, now we can take a look at Johnny Unser's run. It was the first qualifying run of the day. We join it with 2 laps already into the record book. The car number is 9. Johnny Unser, of course, was in this race last year, but it was only a 1-lap run for him.
And just before he went out, he had a lot of great advice from his uncle. Al Unser Sr. spent probably 15 minutes with him, coaching him, telling him what he needed to do on this run. And, you know, this was a good run for him. He has the Nissan Infinity Power, not quite as powerful so far as the Aurora.
Well, I think you hit on 2 keys there, Jan. Number one, the Unser tradition here and that experience and how that can help Johnny. And number 2, this is about as quick as any of the Infinity-powered cars have been all month. So it was a great run for the equipment that Johnny had underneath him.
And, of course, without the world's greatest number of practice laps, late on Saturday, Buddy Lazier was in the car doing the complete shakedown on it, as the veterans are wont to do to prepare a car that's going to come over to someone else. Pronounced it fit, but it didn't give Buddy all that much, or didn't give Johnny all that much time.
No, and also remember that he rolled out right at noon, and that is the warmest time, and has been today the warmest time of day, which means the track was not necessarily ideal conditions, but you know, there was rain that was forecast to be coming any minute, and Ron Himmelgarn did not want to take a chance, put his car first in line, and Johnny did a great job, but unfortunately really not the kind of speed that they were really hoping for. He was close, but I think he needed more.
4-lap average at 209.344 miles an hour, the first run of the day, just past noon local time. And Johnny Unser was in the field. Now there were 32 cars. There was 1 position left after that. We're back to live action, just to let you know that it does continue out here on the Speedway, but as yet no one has presented to qualify. We do expect at least 1 car, that in the person of Scott Harrington, to head down the line as soon as the Foyt crew has his car repaired. The Stanley Cup Conference Finals continue here on ESPN tomorrow night at 7:30. The Colorado Avalanche go against the Detroit Red Wings. It's Game 3 of the Western Conference Championship tomorrow night, 7:30, here on ESPN. Well, here's the good news. Scott Harrington, the car number is 36. Stefan Johansson, Vern Chupin have been working, trying to get a car for Scott Harrington. He had an opportunity in another car. It just didn't work out at all. Then they went to the A.J. Foyt stable and came up with this one.
Yes, this is a Dallara chassis, Oldsmobile power, Goodyear tires. This car definitely has the potential to get into the field. You only need 210 miles an hour, 0.5. Claude Bourbonnais is the man on the bubble at the moment. And it almost looked as though before they had this oil leak that Scott Harrington was coming up to speed very quickly. But now he's going to re-warm up the car and find out if this Foyt machine will do it for him.
Well, so far, Tom, it looks like the fix is in there, meaning that the car is repaired.
Well, I think they're, number one, very fortunate they caught the leak before it did any internal damage to the motor, and that was good. And then, secondly, they didn't have any kind of incident because of the leaking oil. But going back to Johnny Unser's run real quick, a couple things. Number one, the last couple laps were down in speed a little bit, and Johnny indicated there was an electrical problem with the motor that caused it to not hit on all 8 all the way down the back straightaway. We mentioned the fact that that Al Unser was a coach of his and gave him a lot of good advice during the day. I think there was, I think we asked him if Bobby Unser had any advice for him, and I think Bobby said, just keep it out of the snow.
He ran at 210, 209, 207, 209, average 209.3 for the Johnny Unser run. That filled 32 positions. 1 was left to go. Looks to me, Tom, like Scott doesn't have any problems. They were, the good news was that whatever the problem specifically was, and we have a reasonable idea, but we don't have the specifics yet, was something that was, in fact, repairable without yanking the engine out.
Well, we watched him earlier work on that car, and, you know, it was fun to see Foyt sticking his hands in there, and I think...
And getting them burned.
Yeah, well, I don't know if that was the fun part, but one thing we did mention is that, you know, these engines are not turbocharged any longer. They're naturally aspirated, and that allowed the team to get to the problem a lot quicker. That could have been a lot longer repair job if we were under the old rules, but...
Because there would have been more plumbing there to work
exactly, with the turbocharger and stuff, it's harder to get the headers out. They had to remove the headers to get to the problem. So anyway, that was a small thing, but Scott Harrington was happy to see that situation get resolved.
Well, remember, this is a brand-new car for Harrington. The only time he was out in it was a little bit earlier when it immediately developed that problem and came back in. So that speed you just saw, while not spectacular, is also not necessarily representative of what he can do. How do you approach a brand-new car, Jan?
Well, I think he's approaching it exactly how he should. He knows there's not a whole lot of time to get this car qualified. However, he has the confidence now that at least it's sunny. A couple hours ago, he was throwing down his gloves because the rain had come, and he thought, no way am I going to have a chance to get into this 81st running of the Indy 500. And now he's taking his time, kind of cruising around, gradually just building up the speed, and quite frankly, at 199 on really much his last warm-up lap, that's pretty quick.
Gary Gerald, you've been watching down there as this combined crew's been working on this car.
This has been one of those great thrashes in IndyCar parlance here, Paul. You see, perhaps you can see Scott Sharp and Davey Hamilton, 2 of the Foyt drivers, out on the wall in one position. And then as the camera moves to the right, further up the wall, you'll see A.J. Foyt there in no man's land. That's Vern Chupin, who's now coming back toward pit road. Tommy LeMance is out there. And they've just thrown body after body at this thing over the last couple of hours. It's a great test of perseverance. They're showing a 202 sign for Harrington, so the speed's been clicking up a couple of miles per hour each lap. Now that they know they've got a sound power plant, and it looks like the way the crew's reacting, we're going to see him back here on pit road momentarily. Jeff Ward flashes by an Achiever backup car, and now coming by on the front straightaway, getting back on the track for the first time, is Paul Durant, one of the other Foyt drivers.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up that it was Jeff Ward. I think we'd identified it as Eddie Cheever. He certainly wasn't in the Eddie Cheever numbered car, but it was certainly Jeff Ward. We knew that especially when we saw Eddie Cheever being interviewed by Roger Ward Jr., who's one of the journalists out here, and the son, of course, of the great 2-time champion of the Indy 500. 202.8, boy, listen to the joy. As in the A.J. Foyt, Stefan Johansson combined pits, they know this car can run. 2.5 miles of Indianapolis for the 4th and final day of time trials, Bubble Day. You're watching Paul Durant. He has, of course, qualified this car into the field and now is trying to get it over to a race setup. Let's take you back to earlier qualifying, though. The next to pull out as soon as Johnny Unser actually completed his line was Plano, Texas's Greg Ray. And this was the fellow, of course, Jan Beekes, that you will remember has had trouble ever since the first weekend of qualifying.
Yes, he had. For him to be even able to roll out today was such a big bonus for him, because it was last weekend that he came around on his 4th lap, looked like he was easily in the field, well in the field, at 215 miles an hour, and he runs out of fuel on the 4th lap and has to wait till this weekend. Then yesterday he has more problems, and boy, was he a happy man to at least roll it out to try his second attempt.
One of the stories coming out of the garage area was that he was quoted as saying today, we're going to set a record. May not be a speed record, but we're going to be the first car ever to qualify at Indianapolis with a full tank of fuel.
We didn't want to take any chances. He won a few awards last week. Actually, it was a 2-worded award that started with dumb, but they wanted to make no mistakes this time.
So Greg Ray is third lap, 213.614 miles an hour. Steady, good solid speed.
Very, very consistent from one lap to another was Greg Ray. That obviously is what he needed. He knows that he wants to keep them as close together as possible, and he did just that.
But his speed was falling. A couple of tenths is all each lap. First 3 laps all in the 213 range as he turns for home in the checkered flag. Going across the north end there, the 97 car of Greg Ray, and the flag lies just ahead.
He actually was quite a bit quicker the weekend before in what most people considered was a lot worse weather conditions for racing.
So finally, Greg Ray, 213.760, and he makes it into the field. That made for the 33rd qualifier. The field was now full at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And now the question was, what's next? And Tom, that's when the excitement really begins to build.
Well, we had a full field at that point, and now we are to Bubble Day, where we start trying to see who's going to be the 33 fastest or the 33 cars in this race.
For some, either the most fun or the most unfun day in your life.
Well, for Scott Harrington, it's becoming another day similar to what he had last year. It's at this point, he's really the only car left to qualify, and it's going to be fun to see in this last hour or so what happens with that Foyt car.
All right, well, what we're going to do is continue to show you some of the qualifying earlier in the day in just a moment. But first, let's send you down to Gary Gerald.
Thank you, Paul. All of the drama that's been unfolding here, Scott Harrington gets a breather as they go to refuel the car. Is this as intense as it gets at Indianapolis?
Yeah, probably only second to our situation last year. So
You're no stranger to this.
it's kind of like deja vu. You know, I was hoping we weren't going to have to go through that this year, but I guess you got to do what you got to do.
What is it like to suddenly have A.J. Foyt here as a mentor?
Oh, I mean, it's awesome. I mean, I got AJ, and I got Stephen Johansson and Vern Schupan. I mean, if I don't put this thing in the show, man, I'm going to look like a big chump, so I guess I better get out there and get with it.
How hard to sit there while they work to repair that damaged O-ring that cost you, what, an hour or so on the track?
Yeah, it's frustrating to lose an hour, but that's part of the game, you know. I mean, if you can't sit there and get upset about it, I mean, you just got to stay focused and stay calm and go out there and do what we came here to do. So, I mean, I can't really get, you know, what do you do? It happened. There's nothing we can do to change it except fix it. So that's what we did.
Does the engine feel like it's working at 100% capacity?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the car feels good. We just had a little bit of an understeer. And the dash, the tack wasn't working right, so I put the car in 6th gear, which is really too tall. I was out of the rev range, so you're just kind of chugging around. So we'll go back out. We rectified the problem. We'll go back out and leave it in 5th this time. I think get us in more of the meat of the power band, and we're going to increase the stagger a little bit, and we should be ready to go.
I guess I don't have to remind anybody it's about an hour and 3 or 4 minutes to go.
Yep, we put it in last year with 25 to go, so we still got 35 minutes.
Oh, don't you love the attitude?
Well, we've got a lot of stories that we're going to continue to keep track of here. Not only those that are happening right away, but some of the great stories that happened earlier in the day and set the stage for right now. Back at Indianapolis, while practice continues, the track is available for qualification if Scott Harrington or anyone else should want to present a car. But let's move you back to about 5 hours ago when the qualifying was underway. We have now created for you a full qualifying field. The next car to come out was Paul Durant. Now, this is the car that we speculated about so much yesterday. It is an A.J. Foyt car. It carries the number 1.
And, of course, this is an exempt spot, meaning that it's protected. Paul Durant only had to run 203 miles an hour to be guaranteed a spot in the field. But you could tell by those first 2 laps that he was trying to get in on the speed and not just on the exemption. Those first couple of laps were fast enough to actually bump his way into the field with speed. At this point, he didn't even need the exemption.
And A.J. Foyt quite clearly said that he wanted to run it for speed, but the technical and legal fact was that even if it had just 203 miles an hour, it was going to be in.
Well, they didn't give Paul many laps to get this car up to any significant speed, but Paul jumped in, did a great job. Super modified driver, great kid, and this could be a great opportunity for him to run in this year's race.
So the third lap at 209.815 miles an hour as the pace picked up each and every of those first 3 laps.
Now, of course, at this stage, he knows things are looking good, so he's going to tend to just kind of take it easy, make sure that he just continues keeping the momentum. He's seen so many problems here this weekend with guys looking like it was going to be just right, then something goes wrong and they get in trouble. He was very smooth and, quite frankly, made it look easy.
Well, like he said, there's a lot of emotions. He showed up this morning not even knowing if he'd had an opportunity to get in a car this month of May, and what happens? He ends up in one of the best ones available.
And what he did with this run was bump Alessandro Zampedri from the field. Jerry Punch?
Well, Paul Durant, we just showed your run from this morning, and you came to this racetrack this morning walking around. You were the first guy I saw in the garage. You said, hey, Doc, I don't think I have much. I may have one shot. It's A.J. Foyt. Look how far you've come since about 8:30 this morning.
Amazing, isn't it? Yeah. You know, last night I had some inclination when I was out at IRP that possibly something was going to happen this morning. And when I got to the track this morning, for some reason, it kind of, my hopes actually went down a little bit. And then all within a matter of a half an hour, it was from standing there to having the suit on and getting ready to get in the car. So things happened real quick this morning. And I just want to thank A.J. Foyt and Conseco for giving me the opportunity to fill in for Scott Sharp. And, you know, we'll just do the best we can.
Your teammates paid you quite a compliment. Davey Hamilton took the car out this morning and shook it down, and it took him a little while, but he had been in a car very similar off and on the entire month. He was at 213. You went out in just 12 laps or well over 210. He said, that's pretty impressive for Paul.
Well, it was, but part of it, or a lot of it, was that I trust Davey. We've raced together for many years, and I know his style, and we drive very similar. So when he told me what the car was going to do, I trusted it, and, you know, a little by little, we got it up, and indeed the car did what he said it was going to do. So that's just a testament for the way this team puts the cars together. They're all put together very well and good setups, and made it easy.
You know, A.J. Foyt said he wanted someone to be a part of his team that was a team player, and that's one of the reasons he selected you over the 4 or 5 other guys that were around the opening of the garage in the discussions. And the fact that Scott Sharp might have a chance to get in that car and start the car for the points, that doesn't bother you. You knew that going in if that does come to pass.
Well, you know, nothing was ever said about it, but it didn't have to be said. I know that's the way it is, and this is Scott's ride. He does a great job for Conseco and for A.J. Foyt, and it's his ride. If he's ready to go, then he'll be in it, and if he's not, then I'll just give it the best run I can on next Sunday.
Well, congratulations on getting the car in the field. Great qualifying effort.
Thank you.
Paul Durant in just 12 laps. His 13th lap was his first lap of qualifying. Let's go to Gary Gerald.
Scott Harrington getting the mask and the collar buttoned up. He'll put the helmet on in just a moment. He's getting ready to go back out. A.J. Foyt, you and your crew have done yeoman duty down here today, and this was really not part of the manual. This is kind of unsolicited.
Well, they're friends of mine. That's what racing's all about, to try to help other people.
What do you think the chances are within this remaining hour now of this car getting the necessary speed?
Well, we've already run the car fast enough to be in, and we're just working with him right now, trying to get him up to speed.
This was kind of like the old days. AJ was down there hands-on. You were down there working behind those headers trying to get to that O-ring?
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
I think he enjoyed the heck out of it. He's going to go back over here and get another word. He talks with Tommy Lamance, and he's been talking with Scott Harrington, the tire engineers down here, virtually everybody. And this car without tires at the moment, I think maybe they're going to make a little stagger change on this next set that goes out, and we'll see if it helps them bump it up to the necessary speed.
From the time Paul Durant climbed into his car until he completed qualifying, it was a mere 52 minutes. That's a tribute to his skill. One car, Sam Schmidt, during the practice that followed after Durant's qualification, he got sideways but saved the car.
I just thought I was ready.
ESPN 2 boxing tonight. Obakar takes on Jamie Rocky Balboa. 10-round welterweight fight live from Fantasy Springs Casino in Indio, California. That's tonight at 10 o'clock on ESPN 2. So we've taken you through qualifying runs earlier in the day. There was a very short practice session. During that practice session, as I had indicated, Sam Schmidt, his car qualified yesterday, had an engine let go. It dropped oil, got him sideways. He stayed away from the wall after sliding some 420 feet. And then 1 hour after Paul Durant made his qualifying run, it was time for Claude Bourbonnais. But remember yesterday? Remember that run yesterday in practice? If you haven't seen it, look at it now.
Of course, he slaps the wall on the outside of turn number 2, which at this stage it looked like he got away with one here. But then the most amazing part was that he really hardly ever touched the brakes and pretty much drove this car at full speed all the way back to pit road.
I'm not so sure that it wasn't to the chagrin of the crew, because there is damage happening right now.
Well, there is a lot of damage there. It's a little bit amazing that he's able to propel it forward, but I know the owner was cringing, even on the radio, saying, Claude, let's bring it to a stop, but Claude drove her right in. It looks like a midget coming off a quarter mile there, hiking the left front.
Among the things that weren't working was the radio. So this is about 2 o'clock local time this afternoon. 2 laps into the record book. Claude Bourbonnais looking for an opportunity, and his target is Johnny Unser, who had qualified about an hour and a half earlier.
Now, his crew had gone through a lot at this stage, because we mentioned that Sam Schmidt, who of course is with Blueprint Racing, had brought out the yellow, and they were very concerned that rain was right around the corner. The crew stayed up all night, fixed this car. They got a gearbox from Jonathan Bird, who of course runs Mike Groff, and thanks to some help of some of these other competitors, they got this thing up and running.
Well, Claude was real lucky here. He slapped the wall pretty hard the day before, and a lot of times you hit it that hard and you don't have a race car to run the next day, but the guys did a great job for him, and he's doing a great job for them right now.
And remember that before this, he had not even run a lap. The first one, 2:10.2, that was as fast as he's ever run this car. So he was a little bit tentative the first couple of laps, especially in turn number 2, where he slapped the wall, and then he started picking up the pace.
Well, just after you slap the wall, you are a little tentative for a lap or two, and he knows he can't make a mistake, because, you know, this is the last day of qualifying.
He's going in to try and move Johnny Unser out of the 500 field. Laps at 2:08.9, 2:11.2, 2:10.2. And the last lap, he was able to pick the speed up. So as Bourbonnais headed for the checkered flag, big sigh of relief out of the crew. 211.6. Great final lap, his fastest of the run, averaging 210.523 miles an hour. And Johnny Unser was now out of the qualifying lineup. And the conversations began because some of these speeds were a lot faster than those cars that were protected cars in the field, because the protected cars are down 206, 209 miles an hour. We'll cover that in just a minute. Let's go to Jerry Punch.
Well, a moment ago we were standing with Eddie Cheever, and basically he is a car owner and also a driver, but right now he is serving a purpose as a coach, talking to his young driver, Jeff Ward. Eddie, I should call you Coach Cheever. Now, I heard you a moment ago talking to this rookie driver, and you told me you were telling him things that you wish you would have been told when you came to Indianapolis.
There's a lot of little things you learn the more years that you do, and a lot of them are nasty experiences, like what happens when a tire goes away. And Jeff is running with full tanks now, and he's doing a very good job. And I was just he was explaining to me the car felt. I'm saying, well, that you just want to make sure you conserve your tires and try pushing a little bit more and learn everything you can now before you go out, because come Sunday, there is no such thing as a timeout. What you got, you got.
In other words, the learning curve is steep today because it pretty much ends. This is it, except for carburation day.
That's right. Well, I mean, he's had a really great month. He qualified very well, got the car in very early, and we haven't done that much running because there's a little bit of a shortage of engines. So we're working very closely together, and he's giving me a lot of information. I'm giving him a lot of information, but this is the first race he's done, and I think tire wear and how you manage your tires is going to be very important this year, because this is the first time for the last 2 days we've had a hot track, and the cars change completely. When the track is hot here, it gets a lot slipperier. The air isn't as dense. The cars don't handle as well as they could, and you can get carried away with speeds here because this is kind of the speed kingdom of the world. But I think the best way to win this is to be consistent for 500 miles.
You know, I have a chance each fall to do college football at ESPN. I listen to some of the better coaches around the country at halftime in the locker rooms, and you remind me a lot of what these guys are doing. A lot of what they do in the locker room is psychological, is letting the player or the athlete or the driver in this case know that you do have a comfort level, a confidence level, that he can do what he's doing. You told him about how smooth he looked in the corners.
He was, and he does look very smooth. I mean, Jeff is a professional. He's done very well in all the forms of racing that he's done in, but I don't have to remind anybody that he's driving a First Plus Team Cheever car. And if I don't win, I sure as hell hope he does. So I'm trying to give him all the information I can. And he's a great guy to be working with. His mechanics think the world of him. That's the first way you can tell if a racing driver is really giving his best, because mechanics have a sixth sense. If you can see the mechanics are not happy, there's something wrong. And his mechanics would bend over backwards for him, and we're really happy to have him here. So all the stuff I can pass on to him, I'm very happy to do so. But I got to be careful I don't pass on too much stuff, because not only that could turn into a problem the last 50 laps. So I'm teaching him all he needs to know, but not everything I do know.
All right, that's the driver coming out. That was Coach Cheever initially as he's trying to coach his young rookie driver. Let's go back to Gary Gerald.
Jerry, more intrigue up here in the North Pit surrounding Scott Harrington in the 36 car. Keep in mind now, this was an A.J. Foyt car until earlier in the day. They had the car up on jacks. They put a fresh set of Goodyear tires on, even though Firestone is prominently mentioned on the cowling, the rear cowling, as the tire of choice for the Chupan Johansson racing team. Now, suddenly, after a big huddle out on the wall at trackside, they've come back out, and fresh Firestones are going back on the car. The Goodyears have come off. Davey Hamilton ran this car earlier this week at 211 plus miles per hour. That was with Goodyear, and I think what AJ and the team wanted to do was put the identical setup that Hamilton had been using with the Goodyear tires. But now the Goodyears have come off, the Firestones are going back on, and meanwhile the clock continues to tick. Just over 45 minutes to go.
Well, Tom Sneva, you would not assume that those tires are really interchangeable.
Well, you know, you set the car up on one set of tires. The Menard team did this earlier in the month of May. They tried to switch tires. They tested 3,000 miles on one brand and tried to go to the other brand, and it didn't work for them. So, you know, this is a little bit of a surprise. Foyt has been a Goodyear guy for years and years and years, and now he's got one of his cars on Firestone. They set the car up for Goodyear's, and that might be some of the problem that they're trying to work around right now is getting a car that was set up for Goodyear's to adapt to the Firestones in the last hour of qualifying.
Well, it's bubble day at Indianapolis, Doc.
You know, and to further, to maybe amplify a little bit about the Goodyear versus Firestone situation, down here in the month of May, as we're walking up and down pit road, these, as Tommy Sneva would comment, the setups are totally different, and more so this year than I've ever seen before. The Firestone tires, a la Ari Lyon, they require minimal downforce. They're talking about speed with very, very little downforce, trimming the car out, trimming the wing on the car, as opposed to the Goodyear setup. Now, what A.J. Foyt found out early in the month is that if you put minimal downforce, you're going to go very slow on the Goodyear tires. But just the opposite, if you add downforce and wing in the car, and really a little bit more front wing so the car will turn, you pick up more and more speed. We saw Eddie Cheever do the same thing. Foyt, the same thing. In fact, look at the front row. Suspiri, the rookie driver from Team Scandia, on Goodyear tires, they put so much downforce in his car on qualifying, they just to get him comfortable, and he was on the front row with that much speed. So the setups vastly different between Goodyear and Firestone.
Well, we've got you now up to about 3 hours ago in terms of our review of qualifying, as we continue to count down with 44 minutes to go left in the day. When we come back, we'll take a look at one other run from earlier in the day and the impact it had. Back in Indianapolis as ESPN Speed World continues its coverage of the 4th and final day of time trials at Indianapolis, Bubble Day. Scott Harrington finally rolls out once again as his trial of this final day continues, and we can get you further up to speed on the qualifying from earlier in the day. At 1 o'clock, Alessandro Zampedri was bumped out of the field. An hour and 14 minutes later, he had another car and was ready to roll out on a qualification run again. And remember that this is the man 1 year ago, with less than a half a mile to go in the 500-mile run, was in a devastating crash, and it took until January of this year before he could even begin to think about standing on his own 2 feet.
Now, of course, the big strategy here was that Andy Evans, the team owner, and the team manager, Dick Simon, were watching the weather, and they knew when the rain was going to come, but they played it very, very close. In fact, at this stage of his run, there were starting to be some sprinkles that were showing on his visor.
Zampedri, you know, we've tried to talk about the injuries he had from last year's race and the difficulty in coming back, and he's done a great job. He gets bumped out of the field. He's got to jump back into a backup car. The only consolation is he had practice at a speed well above what it was going to take to get him back in the field, and that gave him a lot of confidence to go back out and qualify.
At this point, the drama was the threat of rain. In fact, the threat at this moment was that rain was beginning to sweep over the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Many believed that once it was here, it would be here for the afternoon.
Yes, in fact, you can see some of the raindrops will start to come on the camera lens as he works his way. There they are. You can see that at this stage, he does not know how wet turn 4 is going to be. The same place he had the big accident. He holds his foot down, and he puts it in the field.
So Alessandro Zampedri, 2:13, down to 2:12.3, down to 2:11.6, back up, or back down to 2:09.9, but it was a 2:11.757 average, and that was good enough to bump Lynn St. James out of the field. So that ended the qualifying because the rains came immediately thereafter, but surprisingly enough, they were able to get the track clear and dry because the rain stopped quite suddenly on us.
Well, it was interesting. They were using Dick Simon as their weatherman for that team, and he cut it a little bit close. We figured he was using his hairdo as the barometer to judge by.
Another one of those jokes about guys with big foreheads, Tom. Well, the thing was that they were only about 20 seconds off on figuring when that rain would come, and that was just enough. And thankfully, it was a very light rain. So now the focus of the day came right to this man, Scott Harrington. He went out. This is the new car. Then it didn't work. It had a show of vapor at the back in the pits. They tore that car apart looking for the problem.
Yes, and they found the problem. And, of course, now we know that that new O-ring is doing its job. It's always a concern the first few hot laps that you run. Now, talking again about these tires, this car has been set up, like Tom was telling us, it has been set up on Goodyear tires. They slap Firestone on, and obviously it's going to take a little bit of work. We look at the speeds around the racetrack. He is definitely gaining speed. Last time around turn 4, he certainly lost something, but as it gets updated, he's picking it up each and every lap. Turns 1, I should say 4 and 2 are the ones that he needs to pick up at the moment.
Well, he had an O-ring problem in the engine department earlier. Now his O-ring problem is those O-rings on each corner of that race car. Are they going to be Goodyears or Firestones? And they don't have much time to make some pretty serious decisions.
The time they're focusing on is 210.5 miles an hour. That's the slowest car in the field, and it, well, not really. It's the slowest bumpable car in the field. It belongs to Bourbonnais. Gary Gerald?
Paul, it's interesting down here as we've chronicled the story of the tire switch and then the switch again, and we're watching the stopwatch. We had 2:08 plus on the last lap, and now he flashed behind the seam at us. We've got him at 2:08 again. At the back of the pit box, you find all the Firestone engineers out on the pit wall. A.J. Foyt, Vern Chupin, Stefan Johansson, and all of that entourage. And then at the head of the pit box, you've got all the Goodyear contingent. So we've got 3 distinct camps down here watching with great interest.
Now, the technical description between the two tires, because, of course, we've seen this on the Menard chassis, is that the Goodyear tires seem to have a little stiffer construction, so therefore you would think it would take different springs and shocks than it might with the Firestone. You could see that he got a little bit high that time. Now he's starting to back it off and head for pit road.
Well, you have the construction aspects of tires, but you also have the size aspect. The ride heights on these cars are very, very critical, and the tires vary in height a little bit between the Firestones and Goodyear. So that would have caused maybe a setup pad necessary to make the change, and they're running short on time.
Yeah, that set of runs, the laps they've just completed, only ran 2:08s. They need 2:10 and a half. Let's watch.
They're not going to let me in that close, guys. I'm not going to work in this shoes. I really want it. I mean...
They're checking the stagger at the back of the car. They use a logger's tape to measure the circumference.
Maybe just Foyt talking to him, slapping him around a little bit might gain him a couple miles an hour.
Goes to the front wing.
AJ himself, boy, making a major change.
Wow.
You heard him say 5 turns. That's a pretty substantial adjustment, but that's really good news right now because that means the car is understeering substantially, and if they can take some of the understeer out, the speed should climb.
5 turns. You only do that with a very experienced driver.
A.J. Foyt, now the engineer and aerodynamicist. As he lords over this car, he certainly recognizes the drama. Even Gary Gerald standing there in the background with a big smile on his face as he watches this drama unfold. It's been a great day, and this is making the final moments really something to watch.
That much front wing change, I think I'd sort of soft pedal that car in the first couple of corners or so to make sure they haven't gone too far to correct that problem.
And that change should make the rear end loose?
Yes, what it'll do is it will plant the front end. When he comes into the 2 places where he had push, which was turn 2 and turn 4, he'll go to turn the wheel. It'll be much more positive in the front end.
So they're ready to start Scott Harrington up again and get him back out. And what they're looking for is just a couple of laps above 210.5 miles an hour. And then my guess would be they will bring it in, make sure the fuel is right, make sure they have the right tires on it, run it through tech, and get it out. The one other moment of great apprehension would be is after all the work they've been doing on it, the car still sitting, and he stalled it. Is the car still sitting in legal trim? Because that can certainly change, and since if you're off by 1,000th, it could be a serious problem. Gary?
Paul, as the engine fires to life once again and he starts to pull away, we were just talking with the crew, and I said, that looked like a huge wing change. And he said, keep in mind one thing, on the Delaras, the screws are very, very fine. And so he says, actually, it's not as big an adjustment as you might think.
Oh, very good point. Little finer thread or coarser on the G-force, finer on the Delara. Don't forget, after the Indy 500, the IRL is heading off to Texas Motor Speedway for the True Value 500K. That's on Saturday, June 7th. You can go watch it at the track under the lights or check out on ESPN2. We'll be back with more. ESPN2 will continue to bring you all of the latest from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway all this week. Watch the Indy Live Report weekdays at 6:30 on the Deuce. Well, as we continue to track Scott Harrington moving around the track, let us run down the 33 as they are qualified at the moment. The front row, Ari Lyondike, Tony Stewart, the fastest rookie, Vincenzo Sospiri.
On row number 2 on the inside, Robbie Buell driving for Team Menard. Scott Goodyear, of course, the teammate to Ari Lyondike on the pole, and Jim Guthrie, the Phoenix winner.
In the third row, Jeff Ward, Davey Hamilton, Eliseo Salazar.
Row number 4 on the inside. We see Buddy Lazier, of course, the defending champion, Eddie Cheever we talked to earlier, and Robbie Gordon with a non-exempt spot.
In the fifth row, Stefan Gregoire, rookie Alfonso Giafoni, and rookie Kenny Breck.
Row number 6, Buzz Calkins, co-champion last year, Dr. Jack Miller, and Mike Groff, the current point leader.
In the seventh row, Roberto Carrero, longtime veteran here. 14-time World of Outlaw champion Steve Kinzer and Robbie Groff, brother to Mike.
On row number 8, Billy Boat driving for A.J. Foyt. Sam Schmidt driving for Blueprint, and Billy Rowe also with a non-exempt spot.
In the 9th row, Mark Dismore, Tice Carlson, and Marco Greco.
Row number 10, Dennis Vitolo, Fermin Velez, and Greg Ray, which got his car in today.
So now we're looking at today's qualifiers. Alessandro Zampedri with his second run after being bumped out of the field. Bourbonnais and Paul Durant. And so that's the 11 rows of 3 as they sit at the moment with just over 30 minutes to go. Both Firestone and Goodyear engineers working around the car of Scott Harrington. He's on the racetrack.
And that was Paige Mater there just to the right, the Firestone engineer. He actually is in charge of this particular program here. Look at these speeds. He's starting to come up.
Well, yeah, while you were going through the rows, guys, he'd gotten over 210 miles an hour, so they're getting close with the Harrington car.
And what he needs, Gary Gerald, is a couple of laps well above 210.5.
And he is looking at that right now. Paul flashes by. This one we got here at 209.8. You've got the official speed up there. 209.6, we understand. But there are more smiles down here, but everybody keeps eyeing their wristwatch as well as their stopwatch. And I think we're going to see him back here on pit road as he completes the current lap. And also one other note, and you might address it, Paul, because you've got the grand view where you are, but the wind in the last hour has become a factor again. The flags are almost straight out, and the wind sock at the top of the pylon, which is a 20-knot sock, has been straight out on a couple of occasions.
Well, the steady breeze is not as much as a problem as gusting winds, but they are, at the moment, they appear to be headwinds or slightly off the right side as you come down the front straightaway.
Well, wind's been a factor all month. But like you said, Paul, as long as it's not gusting, but it makes the driver's job a lot tougher because he's got to adjust the car from end to end, from one end of the track to the other.
Scott Harrington brings it in. The clock continues to run. Remember, he even said he did it with the last 25 minutes to go last year. Looks like he is looking at that road once again. Just a moment, we're going to come up with some other graphics for you. The bump list will be one, and the cars that are exempted from being bumped will be another. And that will show you the second level of interest, the other story that is working here today, and that is how this 25-and-8 rule that exists this year will not exist next year could possibly affect the Indy 500.
Yes, and of course 23 of those spots have the opportunity to be utilized. They take the top 25 points earners as far as the cars or the team owners are concerned. 23 of those have been used, and of course that only leaves 10 spots, which is already starting to show us that we're not necessarily, in this case, going to have the fastest 33 cars in this race.
Look at all the different team shirts that are crawling all over that car. I don't think I've ever seen that many different ones.
Well, it's with a half hour to go and trying to get another car in the race. You've got to pull all the stops.
They pulled the front cover off. That covers up the connections to the shock absorbers controlling the front wheels.
Yes, they can make weight changes there if they choose to. They can actually change the cross weight of the car. We know they've been working with the stagger. In the case of Firestone, which they have on there now, they have 3 different choices of stagger. So once they nail down the stagger they like, again, just to review, that is the differential in the size of the outside tire in the rear as opposed to the inside, so that when you accelerate, it turns the car to the left.
The bump speed is 205 miles an hour. And these are cars that are protected. They only had to run 203, and they were guaranteed a spot in the Indy 500. Now, with the bump speed sitting there at 210.5, here is where the concerns and conversations are coming now, because some people say that, golly, you got guys up above 210, well above these speeds.
Yeah, that's a situation we've gotten into. It only took 203 or over if you had the exempt spot. There's a lot of these guys that are less than the 210.5 that Bourbonnais at, that's on the bump. But a lot of these guys took the speed knowing they'd be in the race, and they opted to just get the car in, and then they could start working on race speed. So a lot of these guys that aren't as fast as the 210.5 speed are potentially, or have cars that can go that fast. They just opted to get the car in the show and then work on race speeds.
The bump list itself is Claude Bourbonnais at 210.5, Then Kinzer, Steve Kinzer, 210.793. Alessandro Zampedri at 211.757. And Billy Rowe at 212.752. Johnny Unser, Lynn St. James, and Zampedri have been bumped out of the field, but Zampedri was able to qualify back into the field with his backup car. There's that bubble list for you. Take it all the way down.
Now, of course, speaking of Lynn St. James, once she was bumped from the field, she went and pleaded her case to Leo Mel and to the officials of the Indy Racing League, hoping that there might possibly be an opportunity that it could start more than 33 cars, because it's not necessarily written in stone that 33 is the number they'll start here.
Well, of course, that's really an assumption. That would be the logical argument that she would present. But when she came out of the IRL office, she was very distraught and upset, and the presumption would then be that if that were what she was saying, then probably she heard, we're not going to make that decision now. If we make it at all, wait and see what happens. And 33 has been traditional, if not ordained here. So A.J. Foyt and the gang, they're still trying to get Scott Harrington up to speed as he talks it over with the Firestone engineers, and the clock is counting toward the final gun. The Stanley Cup Conference Finals continue here on ESPN Tuesday night at 7:30. The Philadelphia Flyers take on the New York Rangers in Game 3 of Eastern Conference action Tuesday, 7:30 on ESPN. At Indianapolis, well, we may just have a decision to qualify, Gary.
Well, this is the news we've been waiting for. About 23 minutes to go, and we just got the word. You can see them. They've been down here taping up the entries to the radiator. That's one of the tip-offs. You're trying to aerodynamically streamline this car as much as you can. They put on a fresh set of Firestones. They are ready to roll this car to the tech line.
Tom Sneva taping up the entrance into the coolers. That's going for power, isn't it?
Well, I don't know if it'll do much for power, Paul, but what it will do is change the center of the pressure in the car. And when you add front wing, like we've seen them do just a little while ago, that adds front downforce. It changes the center of pressure, moves it farther forward, and taping up those inlets will tend to do the same thing.
Now, of course, that is one of the radiator inlets. So we saw that Tommy Lamance was over there downloading the information off the computer. So they may also have found that they wanted to raise the engine temperatures to get it more in the proper operating range. And, of course, it's noticeable on this car, but it's on most of the cars. But this particular car doesn't have the matching tape like everybody else seems to have figured out.
Well, they brought everything else out. They don't necessarily have to have the tape. Think about the NHRA guys. You'll get a guy like Don Prudhomme, who said to me one time when he was going for a big U.S. national victory, we're going to let that thing sit and cook on the line, because heat is horsepower.
Well, they don't have time to match up the tape, but one way to gain some speed is they tape off the opening in the driver's helmet, and that used to work for John Cock quite often.
And it worked for you. Actually, what you're really saying, John Cock had the narrowest little slit you ever saw in a helmet.
Yeah, and we're pretty sure he didn't look through it very often either, but that's another story.
Well, he's your friend, or at least he was. What a lot of the drivers say is they're checking the stagger. And, Jan, I saw you looking. Did you get the numbers?
No, I couldn't quite get the number.
They need both of them anyway.
Well, yeah, it doesn't do you too much good to show the inside number. Again, that's a logger's tape that they use. They check that within thousandths of an inch, and it does make quite a big difference. Remember, when you're running at a place like this, just a little bit of stagger does make a big change. When you drive down the straightaways, you actually do turn a little bit to the right, because the car wants to turn left when you're on the power. That's the idea. If the car needs to turn better, you use more stagger.
And then, too, you'll tend to turn the right rear end. Just tow it in a little bit, and that helps the car. That wheel drives them right through the corner and helps them with that turn as well. Well, what's going to happen with the rules? Jerry Punch?
Well, Paul, first of all, let me say there has been no ruling as of yet, but we're down here in the garage area and chasing some of the stories and some of the speculation. And here's what the speculation, if you want to believe what you're hearing, here's what I hear could possibly happen. You know, the tradition here at Indianapolis Motor Speedway is to start the fastest 33 cars in the field. Now, currently, 2 cars have been bumped. We've mentioned that Johnny Unser and Lynn St. James have been bumped from the field. Now, as we wait for Scotty Harrington's run, if Harrington were to qualify with a 4-lap average of greater than 210.523, meaning that he would bump Claude Bourbonnais from the field. That means that 3 cars would be bumped. Those 3 cars would actually be faster than 7 other cars that are in the field by virtue of exemptions. And since the exemption policy has been done away with for next year to invite as many as possible, speculation would lend you to believe that the field could possibly be expanded to 36 cars for this year for the 81st running of the Indy 500. Now, that's in case Harrington does bump Bourbonnais, gets in the field by virtue of speed, and then Bourbonnais would be the 3rd car bump. They could possibly add Bourbonnais, Unser, and St. James, all 3 to the field for a 36-car starting line. That's pure speculation, but that's what I understand could very possibly happen. In fact, there may be an announcement scheduled for about 6:02, 6:03 o'clock this evening, p.m. this evening here, Indianapolis time, to possibly consider making that policy.
Without question, IRL officials are talking about it.
Oh, without a doubt, Paul. Without a doubt, that's being discussed. And I think what we're looking at here is tradition.
Now, what we're watching here is Scott Harrington's car being rolled up, ready for tech. Jerry Punch, while I still have you, I'd like to ask you, some time ago, after she was bumped out of the field, you were able to talk very briefly with Lynn St. James, and she was very distressed.
Well, she was, and so was Johnny Unser. I mean, they come here with so much anticipation. They've got sponsor commitments, and Johnny Unser, with the family name, the legacy, 9 wins among his uncles, his 2 uncles, and his cousin Al Jr. And of course, Lynn St. James wanted to be here. This is the cornerstone of what she does for each year and as her career. And they came here and they met with some of the officials of of the Indy Racing League. And when you think about the fact, I mean, you got to commend Leo Mel. I mean, the executive director of the IRL. I mean, the wisdom, the expertise, the credibility he lends here, and the way he's able to look at a lot of things. I mean, a lot of thought is going into what's trying to be decided behind this concrete wall. A lot of consideration toward the competitors. You know, that's the idea here in the Indy Racing League, is to give people a chance. It's part of what this country was founded on, was an opportunity to come here and run the Indy 500. And by tradition, every year the fastest 33 cars have been in the field. In fact, the last time, if I recall, they expanded the field here was back in 1979 when they added 2 cars on a very special qualifying day. In fact, it was a Saturday before the race. They had a qualifying day, a special qualifying for 11 cars, and added 2 to the field to start 35. So speculation here is that possibly we could have as many as 36 cars start the field for this 81st 500.
Well, that added, the other scenario that's going to confuse it even more is, what if Harrington goes out, doesn't go 210.5, but goes fast enough, a 209, 208, fast enough to be one of the fastest 33. This is what we're going to have to wait to see what happens.
Of course, no one's going to know for sure, because they're not going to make any kind of announcement, what Dr. Jerry Punch was telling us, until 6:02 or 6:03. So that's going to make it that much tougher for A.J. Foyt to know what to do next.
And that's why Leo Mel gets the big bucks. He can make those decisions. We can sit, watch, and speculate. They push the car forward. Qualifying run coming up. Scott Harrington's car being pushed through the tech line. Gary Gerald's there watching.
We watch. A.J. Foyt walks by. A.J., what were the final words to Scott Harrington?
Well, I just told him to try to cool it. I mean, we're under a lot of pressure. You know, we have Firestone tires on the car. They have a deal with Firestone, and like I say, I'm not that experienced with the Firestone tires, so we're just making a shot at it and see if he can pick up. He's not that far off. It's just a little bit.
That big wing change up there seemed to pay off in the last time out.
Well, it did, and we made another minor one. Just hope it picks up that extra little bit.
All right, thank you, A.J. Let's sit back here. Vern Chupan is also standing along. It's kind of the irony here of you and Stefan, your team, and A.J. Foyt's been the man in the last couple of hours, though. It's like he just kind of took this whole thing on his shoulders.
Well, that's A.J. You know, he's just magic when the chips are down and under pressure. There's nobody like him, is there?
So right now, if you had anything, do you say to your driver, any final words from the standpoint of you two guys?
That the car's not going to bite him. He can do it, and we know he can do it. And he's right there. He only needs half a mile an hour, and, you know, he'll put it in the show.
All right, we've heard from Foyt, we've heard from Chupan. Now it's all up to Scott Harrington. We've got about 14 minutes to go to hit the top of the hour. We'll come back to see a qualifying attempt at Indianapolis.
ESPN Speed World coverage of the 4th and final day of time trials at Indianapolis. Bubble Day is brought to you by Valvoline DuraBlend, the #1 selling semi-synthetic motor oil. And the original Coors fastest lap of the day as we watch Scott Harrington ready to climb in his car and strap in for what he hopes is a ride into this field. The original Coors fastest lap was Greg Ray at 213.939 miles an hour earlier in the day. Now, the focus on Scott Harrington.
Yes, and of course, Greg Ray, we thought he had lost $25,000 for 1 gallon of fuel, but now it looks like he'll have the fastest time and get that money back.
Well, we got one qualifier yet left, so depending on how big a change and how much effect that had on Scott's race car, it's going to be fun to watch this last few minutes.
So much riding on these final few moments at Indianapolis. This has produced some great drama, some great excitement, even some great humor. You remember, Tom, the year that Jim Hurtubise had his high-speed roadster pushed next in line. They were waiting for the final moment. The gun went off. We were waiting for the run by Hurtubise, and what happened?
Well, that was great to watch all day. He kept letting cars go by him in the qualifying line, and when 6 o'clock went off, he opened the hood on the roadster, and all there was Miller Lite and no motor.
Had a case of beer in there. So all of these have played at Indianapolis.
A.J. Foyt, Stefan Johansson to his left, Vern Schuppan. No shortage of experience here, talking to Scott Harrington. To the right, that's Keith Ward. We'll give him the instructions.
I think A.J.'s given all the instructions. What was it? Keith say, A.J., let me have her now.
We talked about this earlier today. What happens is the tension is so high here that they just remind the drivers exactly what is going to happen during the qualifying itself. When the nerves and the pulse is racing, you just want to make sure the last thing the driver hears is exactly the way that it's going to unfold.
Sometimes, you know, it's just hard to realize for for people that haven't gone through this, that some people have been there, and if you haven't been there, you really can't relate to what's really going through Scott's mind right now. He did it last year. He actually looks remarkably cool to me for the kind of pressure he's under. Boyd, on the other hand, he's like a little fire cat right now.
He loves every minute of this. This is what makes him great, too, conquering over adversity. Jerry Punch, what's Bourbonnais thinking?
Well, Claude Bourbonnais sits here on the wall, and Claude, your first time, and I know you don't look forward to having to go through this many times in the future, but what are your thoughts now thinking about possibly being bumped from the starting lineup?
Well, there's only 10 minutes left. It's a possibility, although I have the 22nd fastest time of the month for qualifying. It's kind of hard to sit here and wait with not even 10 minutes to go.
Well, we may sit with you and watch. You know, Scott Harrington has to run a 210.523 average or better than what you ran to get in the field. While he warms up, considering how hard the crew worked from what happened yesterday, the shunt with a turn 2 wall, to come back with the car rebuilt and get in the field. I mean, you must feel somewhat vindicated anyway, getting the car put back together overnight and getting it in the starting lineup.
Absolutely. The Blueprint team did a great job. They worked all night. All the credit goes to the crew, and you know, they gave me a car that was exactly the same as the one I had yesterday, and I just went out and did my job.
Well, that is Canadian Claude Bourbonnais, and he sits here on the wall. We are about 5 feet from the interview area where if Scott Harrington gets the car in the field, he will roll to a stop. Meanwhile, he rolls by us, and Bourbonnais watches to see if he will start the Indy 500.
On the practice laps now, the warm-up, 3 laps. We'll try to keep track of the speeds, maybe even be able to put in the full course map and see how the warming up is going. 210.523 miles an hour. That is the speed to beat. There it is, the bubble speed.
At this stage, he's just trying to get a feel for the car. He will actually start to push it pretty hard on this next lap, and if something does not feel right, there's no one else in line. So if something was wrong, if the adjustment didn't do what Scott Harrington was hoping for, he would still theoretically have time to duck into pit lane and make another attempt. But boy, he is hoping he doesn't have to do that.
You know, you're absolutely right. Looking at the clock right now, he could run up until the final seconds of the qualifying run and would still have time to duck into the pits, make a very quick change, and go out with a second attempt.
Well, there's really two question marks right now left in this day. One is how fast will Scott go, and two, like Boubinet talked about, he was 26-second quickest. Is he going to get bumped out of the show or just into the next row?
207 was the first warm-up lap. The field average, 212.442 at this moment. 210.5 the speed to beat as Scott Harrington is on his way on a 10-mile run. 212 on the last lap. Wow. Coming to the green flag. That is fast enough. Will it hold up?
Well, the problem here that could be a factor is he's warmed up hard. He's heated up these tires. Now, if the balance isn't perfect, he might overheat that tire before the third or fourth lap is done, and that could affect the total speed.
And, of course, he will know every time that he crosses the start-finish line on his dashboard, it will tell him exactly what his speed is. If he saw 212 on that first one, he's going to know that that's enough, and then he might tend to run just a little more conservative.
214.
Wow.
214.061. That's his first lap.
Oh, no, he's in trouble.
Oh, he's in trouble. He's into the wall. After a spectacular lap at 214 miles an hour, all of the work of the day goes away in a split second.
There's a lot of damage on the left side of that car.
We're watching him, too, to make sure he's okay. I don't see any movement. Boy, look at that car.
They were trying to take push out of the car, and that's the one risk you take. If you take too much push out, the next thing that happens, it gets loose.
So Scott Harrington into the wall. All of the USAC rescue team is there. There's more even on the way. They use light water to spray down any of the oil that might catch fire. A.J. Foyt, Stefan Johansson, Vern Chupan. Look at the frustration. Look at the pain in A.J. Foyt's eyes. You know, as many years as this grand champion has been here, it still hurts when there is a problem on the Speedway and after trying all day. So in turn two at Indianapolis, Scott Harrington gets us up against the wall and ends his qualifying run. We only hope that he is okay. We wait for word from the scene itself. We did not see any immediate movement, but we do hope he's okay. We'll be right back. Well, qualifying the fourth day, the bubble day, has effectively come to an end at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway as Scott Harrington slapped the wall on the second turn after a very quick lap in qualifying at 214.061 miles an hour. The rescue crews are there. He is still in the car. We don't have any report from the scene. Should we have one, we will give it to you immediately. Let's use both Jan Beekes and Tom Sneva's expertise to go back and look at this accident on his second lap of qualifying. We'll show it to you from a camera that looks all the way from the far end of the back straightaway first. What he was doing was running just, it seemed to be a little high as he came off of turn one and went across the south short chute. They continue to work at the scene with him, and of course we continue to be very concerned.
And, of course, we know that they put quite a bit of wing into that car. And then we also heard from A.J. Foyt that they made one additional change just before he went out.
We can see the car here entering the corner. Everything looks fine. I think this is probably at the end of the back straightaway. No big problem here. But as you follow it, the thing just jumps sideways. Now, that's a little bit early in the corner, but you see it does a 360, and it gets in left front, left side. Both left sides go away. Very heavy impact, and you know, it's such a fine line. We're not sure. Again, we've seen this with engine failures causing this kind of situation. People don't realize how much of a fine line it is. Again, the car jumps sideways. We're not sure what the reason is, but they're doing almost 360s, and it's getting in to the nose of the race car, and it slaps both the left front nose and left rear real hard.
We didn't see anything as the car started to slide that would indicate an engine failure. All of that analysis will have to happen. Our concern right now is for the good health of Scott Harrington. Sports Center is coming up next. They will continue to track this story as well as that announcement that should come in a few minutes.
After turning an initial